Lerato was not just any student at Sandton High. She was the student. With her flawless skin, expensive jewelry, and the latest iPhone, she commanded attention wherever she went. Every morning, she arrived in a sleek German car, stepping out with confidence that turned heads. To her, money was power, and power was beauty. She had it all, or so she thought. The other girls envied her, the boys adored her, and teachers turned a blind eye to her arrogance. Her closest friends were merely accessories to her perfect image, and she made sure everyone knew that she belonged to a different class. While other girls wore their school uniforms modestly, Lerato had tailored hers to fit her own seductive style. Her skirt was scandalously short, barely covering anything, and her shirt was always a size too tight, accentuating her curves. She saw no problem with bending the rules, believing that her beauty gave her the right to do as she pleased. But what her classmates didn't know was the real source of her glamorous lifestyle. Behind the flashy cars and high-end vacations were the powerful, older men who kept her world spinning. She saw nothing wrong with it. To her, it was just another way of securing a future that she believed school could never provide. Lerato's main benefactor was Mr. Dlamini, a well-respected businessman and a married politician. He was generous, showering her with money, designer clothes, and even an upscale apartment in Sandton. In return, she played the perfect companion, a trophy on his arm during high-class events, and a secret he kept from his family. She reveled in the luxury, believing she had mastered life's game. Her classmates struggled with assignments and part-time jobs while she attended private yacht parties, wearing extravagant outfits that cost more than their tuition fees. She saw their dreams of hard work and perseverance as foolishness. Why struggle when men will pay for everything? She often told herself, laughing at the so-called smart girls who focused on their studies instead of securing a rich man. But beneath the glamour, a storm was brewing, one that would soon rip apart the golden world she had built. One afternoon, as Lerato scrolled through social media in her designer-filled apartment, a message popped up from her childhood friend, Naledi. "Be careful, girl. These men don't love you. They just use you," it read. Lerato scoffed and rolled her eyes. Naledi had always been the cautious type, the kind who focused on her studies instead of having fun. "Jealousy is a disease, babes," Lerato typed back before blocking her. That night, at an exclusive party in a mansion overlooking Johannesburg, Lerato noticed something unusual. Mr. Dlamini seemed tense, his eyes darting around the room. When she asked if something was wrong, he brushed her off with a forced smile. "Just politics, my love," he said, handing her another glass of champagne. She shrugged and returned to taking selfies, unaware that her dream life was about to spiral into a nightmare. A week later, while on a shopping spree at Sandton Mall, Lerato received a call from an unknown number. "Stay away from my husband, you little tramp," a woman's voice screamed before hanging up. Lerato's heart pounded. She knew Mr. Dlamini was married, but his wife had never confronted her before. When she told him about the call, he laughed it off. "Ignore her, she's just insecure," he said, stroking her hand. But days later, strange things began happening. The rent for her apartment wasn't paid, her credit card was declined, and suddenly Mr. Dlamini was no longer answering her calls. Panic set in as she realized that the safety net she had depended on was vanishing. At school, whispers followed her wherever she went. The same boys who once adored her now called her names behind her back. The girls she used to mock for their cheap lives were now watching her downfall with satisfaction. Still, she refused to believe that her reign as queen was over. She had come too far to let everything slip away. Lerato returned to her apartment one evening only to find the locks changed. A security guard handed her an eviction notice. Confused and desperate, she called Mr. Dlamini repeatedly, but his phone was off. She sank to the ground, realizing she had nowhere to go. The luxurious world she had built on lies and deception was crumbling. As she walked through the cold streets of Sandton, clutching her designer handbag, reality hit her hard. She had no savings, no real friends, and nowhere to sleep. Her pride refused to let her call her grandmother in Soweto, but what choice did she have? She boarded a taxi, covering her face in shame as she left behind the life she once flaunted. Arriving in Soweto was like stepping into a different universe. The once vibrant streets of Sandton had been replaced with dusty roads and small houses packed closely together. Her grandmother's home, a tiny four-roomed house, was a stark contrast to the luxurious apartment she had lost. Lerato? Her grandmother gasped in shock when she opened the door. What happened, child? Tears welled in Lerato's eyes. Gogo, I messed up, she whispered. Her grandmother welcomed her in, but life here was different. There were no hot showers, no designer clothes, and no extravagant dinners. She had to wake up early to help with chores, something she had never done before. As days passed, the gossip from old friends reached her ears. Naledi had just secured a scholarship to study abroad. The same girls she had mocked were now making real progress in life, while she struggled to adjust to her new reality. The regret started to eat away at her. Had she thrown her future away for temporary luxury? Lerato's life took an even darker turn when she began feeling ill. Her once perfect skin started breaking out, and she felt weak and tired all the time. She finally went to the clinic and was diagnosed with HIV. Her world shattered. She had been living a carefree life, assuming nothing could touch her. Now, she was confronted with a disease that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She called Mr. Dlamini, desperate for answers, but his number was disconnected. The married politician who had once lavished her with everything was gone, just like everything else she had taken for granted. Despite her circumstances, Lerato's grandmother encouraged her to visit the clinic regularly and start treatment. It wasn't easy, and the stigma of HIV weighed heavily on her. But as she took her first dose of medication, she felt a small sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could get better. She spent her days helping her grandmother, doing chores, and beginning to appreciate the simple things in life. One day, as she was walking to the market, she ran into Thandi, one of the girls from her old school. Thandi had become a teacher and had successfully completed her studies. She smiled warmly at Lerato, offering her support without judgment. Things might not be easy now, but you can turn it around, Lerato, Thandi said. You're stronger than you think. Lerato was touched. She had once mocked girls like Thandi, thinking they were wasting their time studying. Now, Thandi was the one who was successful, while Lerato had to learn to survive on her own. Living with her grandmother had taught Lerato many lessons. She learned how to cook, clean, and take responsibility for her own life. She had no luxury, no fast cars, and no expensive clothes. But what she did have was time. Time to reflect on her mistakes and rebuild from the ground up. Her grandmother often reminded her, "It's not about what you have, child, but who you are." These words stayed with Lerato, guiding her as she began to understand the value of humility and hard work. Lerato's first steps toward redemption were difficult. She found work at a local market, selling traditional food with her grandmother. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. And for the first time in years, she felt a sense of pride. With each passing day, she grew stronger, physically, emotionally, and mentally. She began saving money, paying off small debts, and making plans for the future. It was a long road, but she was willing to take it. As months passed, Lerato's perspective on life began to shift. She had started volunteering at the local school, helping students with their studies in exchange for learning new skills. Her grandmother's encouragement had finally begun to sink in. Lerato now saw the value in education, not as something that was beneath her, but as a means of self-empowerment. The girls she had once looked down on were now in college or running successful small businesses. Lerato had spent so many years mocking them for wasting their time while they were building their futures. The sense of loss she felt was like a cold weight on her chest, but she no longer let it consume her. She had learned that it wasn't too late to start over. One day, Lerato bumped into Naledi again, her old friend from school. Naledi had just returned from studying abroad and had secured a high-paying job. She looked the same as before, smart, confident, and full of life. "How are you doing, Lerato?" Naledi asked, a smile on her face. Lerato's heart sank, but she smiled back. I'm learning, slowly but surely. The two women spent the afternoon catching up. Naledi spoke about her experiences and the challenges of working hard to succeed. Lerato couldn't help but admire her friend's resilience. They talked about everything from life, love, and the mistakes they both had made. It was a turning point for Lerato. She realized that she had so much to learn, but she was ready to do so. Even though Lerato was slowly rebuilding her life, her past haunted her. There were nights when she would lie awake in the small bed at her grandmother's house, replaying the extravagant life she once had. She still missed the attention, the wealth, and the feeling of being admired. But she knew she could never go back. Her decisions had consequences. No amount of money or status could ever erase the reality of her current situation. The most painful part was accepting that the people she had hurt in the past, those girls she had belittled, were the ones who were now thriving. The thought made her sick to her stomach, but it was also the truth she needed to face. Determined to make things right, Lerato reached out to some of the girls she had once ridiculed. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she wanted to apologize. She first approached Thandi, the girl who had always been kind to her. "I'm sorry, Thandi. I was wrong to judge you and your friends," Lerato said, her voice trembling. Thandi looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "I appreciate you saying that, Lerato. It's never too late to change." Lerato felt a sense of relief wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. Lerato's efforts to better herself did not go unnoticed. One day, a local businesswoman who ran a successful retail store offered Lerato a position as a sales assistant. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a fresh start. The woman, Mrs. Chabalala, had heard about Lerato's struggle and offered her the opportunity not out of pity, but because she saw potential in her. "Everyone deserves a second chance," Mrs. Chabalala said. "You're welcome here." Lerato was overjoyed. She knew this could be the opportunity to rebuild her life and start anew. Despite her new job, Lerato still struggled with feelings of inadequacy. She had been told for so long that her beauty was her greatest asset. The idea that she had value beyond her looks was a difficult concept to accept. But at her new job, she discovered that she was more than just her appearance. She had skills, potential, and, most importantly, the ability to learn. As time passed, Lerato became more confident in her own abilities. She built meaningful relationships with her coworkers and learned what it meant to work hard for what she had. She still faced challenges, but each obstacle was a reminder of how far she had come. Lerato was finally beginning to see her life in a new light. She had made peace with her past mistakes, and her future, though uncertain, no longer seemed as daunting. She had learned to embrace the simplicity of life, finding joy in the small victories. Every day at her new job brought new opportunities to grow and learn. And yet, as she stood on the threshold of a new chapter, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something more she needed to do. She wasn't just working to survive anymore. She was working to thrive. Lerato began to ask herself deeper questions about what she wanted to do with her life. It wasn't enough to just get by anymore. She wanted to make a difference. She realized that the luxury and beauty she had once craved were fleeting, and that true fulfillment came from giving back to others. She started volunteering at a local orphanage, helping children with their studies and teaching them life skills. It wasn't glamorous work, but it felt right. She saw the smiles on the children's faces and knew that she was doing something important. For the first time in years, Lerato felt truly at peace with herself. Lerato's grandmother, who had always been her rock, watched as her granddaughter transformed before her eyes. "You've changed, Lerato. You've learned the value of humility," she said one afternoon, smiling warmly at her. Lerato nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I had to, Gogo. I had to lose everything to find out what really matters." Her grandmother chuckled. "Sometimes you have to fall to rise again." Lerato had no illusions about the road ahead. Her past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had worked hard to rebuild her life, and while the scars of her mistakes would always be with her, she had found a new purpose. As she looked toward the future, Lerato knew that she had the strength to overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. The girl who had once lived for the superficial had found meaning in the simple, in the real, in the genuine connection she now had. And for the first time in years, Lerato smiled, not because of her beauty, but because she had found something much more important: wisdom, humility, and a sense of purpose. Lerato continued to find solace in the community she was building in Soweto. The children at the orphanage she volunteered at became her second family. She spent her weekends teaching them, helping them with homework, and showing them that their circumstances did not define their futures. Through this, she began to see the strength of community, the same sense of unity she had once overlooked in her pursuit of wealth and status. She saw the resilience in the people around her and learned that real success wasn't about what you had, but how you uplifted others. It was a lesson she would carry with her forever. One afternoon, as Lerato was walking through Soweto's bustling streets, she saw a familiar face. It was Zanele, one of the girls she had once bullied at Sandton High. Zanele was standing outside a small cafe, her hand on her hip, looking confident and well put together. For a moment, Lerato hesitated. Should she approach her? Was she ready to face the people she had hurt? But then, something inside her told her to go forward. She walked up to Zanele, who looked at her in surprise. "Zanele," Lerato said softly, "I owe you an apology." Zanele raised an eyebrow but then smiled warmly. "You do, Lerato. But it's okay. We all make mistakes." Lerato sighed with relief, but deep down she knew she had come a long way. This moment, this conversation, was part of her healing. A few months later, Lerato received an unexpected phone call from Mrs. Chabalala, her boss. The store was expanding, and Mrs. Chabalala wanted Lerato to take on a larger role. She had noticed how hard Lerato worked, how dedicated she was to her job, and how much she had grown. The offer was a dream come true for Lerato. She would be in charge of a new store opening in one of the larger shopping malls in Johannesburg. It was a chance to truly prove herself and to take on a leadership role that she had never imagined for herself. "Thank you," Lerato said, her voice full of emotion. "I won't let you down." Lerato spent the next few weeks preparing for the grand opening of the new store. She put in long hours working with the team to make sure everything was perfect. Slowly, she began to regain the confidence that had been shattered in her past. But this time, it wasn't based on her looks or her ability to manipulate others. It was based on her skills, her work ethic, and the relationships she had built along the way. On the opening day, Lerato stood in front of the store, watching as customers poured in. She couldn't believe how far she had come. This wasn't the life she had imagined when she was a teenager, but it was one that felt real. It felt like her own. While working at the new store, Lerato met someone who would change her life in ways she hadn't expected. A young woman named Kula. Kula was a fashion designer who had just started her own clothing line. She was smart, ambitious, and kind, and the two quickly became close friends. Kula didn't see Lerato as the former Queen of Sandton or the girl who had made poor choices. She saw her for who she was now, someone who was trying to rebuild, someone who had a lot of potential. Together, they collaborated on small fashion projects, combining Kula's designs with Lerato's eye for business. Lerato had always known she had a passion for fashion, and now she had someone to help her nurture it. Even with her new job, her new friends, and her budding fashion collaboration, Lerato still struggled with the fear of judgment. She had lived her entire life being judged for her looks and her status. Now, as she tried to build a new life, she was terrified that people would see her past and judge her for it. But with each passing day, Lerato realized that she couldn't control how others saw her. All she could do was focus on her own growth and the positive impact she was making on the world around her. She could no longer live her life based on fear. She had to live it based on authenticity. One evening, while out with Kula at a local restaurant, Lerato ran into an old flame, Mr. Dlamini, her former sugar daddy. He was seated with a group of friends, his eyes widening when he saw her. "Lerato," he said, standing up with a forced smile, "It's been a long time." Lerato took a deep breath. "It's been a while," she replied, her voice calm but firm. Mr. Dlamini seemed to want to pick up where they left off, but Lerato knew better. He was married and had caused so much pain in her life. This time, she wouldn't fall into his trap. She turned to Kula, who had noticed the tension and was already getting ready to leave. "I'm done with that life," Lerato said quietly to herself as they walked away, her head held high. Lerato continued to work hard and grow in her new role at the store. She never lost sight of the lessons she had learned in her journey, lessons about humility, about not relying on external validation, and about the importance of self-worth. Her relationship with her grandmother also deepened. Gogo had always been the foundation of her strength, and Lerato now understood how much her grandmother had sacrificed for her family. Every time Lerato spent time with her grandmother, she was reminded of the value of family and community. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "True beauty comes from the heart, not from what you wear." As Lerato's career continued to blossom, she faced new challenges. With greater responsibility came greater expectations. There were times when she felt overwhelmed, but she pushed through, knowing that she had to continue striving for her dreams. She sacrificed a lot of time with her friends and family, but she knew it was all worth it. Her ambition was now focused on more than just herself. It was about building a future that would make her proud, one where she could give back to her community and help others like her who had lost their way. Lerato began to see that her past, though painful, had given her the opportunity to help others. She started speaking at local schools, sharing her story of redemption and the importance of making wise choices. She wanted young girls to learn from her mistakes, to avoid the pitfalls of seeking validation through superficial means. Her talks were well received, and Lerato felt a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. Helping others gave her a sense of purpose that went beyond anything she had ever achieved. With time, Lerato became more confident in who she was. She no longer relied on the approval of others. Instead, she knew her worth, and it was not based on the car she drove or the clothes she wore. Her confidence now stemmed from within. She had earned it. Her friends, both old and new, recognized the change in her. They saw the growth in her character, the sincerity in her actions, and the humility that had replaced her once inflated sense of superiority. After much reflection, Lerato decided to take another big step. She wanted to start her own business. Drawing on everything she had learned from working in retail and her growing passion for fashion, she began planning her own boutique. It wasn't going to be easy. She had no investors, no large network, and no guarantees of success. But Lerato was determined. She knew the road to success would be long and filled with obstacles, but she was ready. She had started over before, and this time she was doing it for herself, not for anyone else's approval. Lerato's boutique began to take shape, and with Kula's help, they developed a brand that was all about empowerment, self-love, and authenticity. They worked late into the nights, designing clothes that would speak to women who, like Lerato, had once felt lost, but had now found their voice. It wasn't about the money or the fame. It was about creating something that mattered, something that could inspire others to pursue their dreams. After months of hard work, Lerato's boutique opened its doors. It was a modest affair, but it felt like a dream come true. The first customers walked in, excited to see what Lerato had created. As she stood behind the counter watching them shop, she felt a deep sense of pride. This was her dream. Her vision came to life. Through her journey, Lerato had rebuilt relationships that had once been lost. She had become close again with her family, especially her grandmother, who had been her anchor throughout all of this. She had also reconnected with Naledi, and the two of them spent more time together, sharing stories of their paths to success. Despite all the progress, Lerato knew she would always have to confront her past. The people she had wronged, the choices she had made, those would always be a part of her story. But now she no longer felt defined by them. She had taken responsibility for her actions and worked hard to change. One day, a familiar face came to the boutique. It was Mr. Dlamini's wife, looking older but still dignified. She walked up to Lerato, her gaze steady. "You've come a long way, Lerato," she said softly. "I hope you keep going." Lerato nodded. I will. As time passed, Lerato continued to grow. Her boutique gained a loyal following, and she became a well-known figure in the local fashion industry. But she never forgot the lessons she had learned along the way. Lessons about humility, redemption, and the true meaning of success. She had once been the queen of Sandton, but now she was something far more valuable. A woman who had earned her place in the world. Lerato's journey was far from over, but each step forward felt like a new beginning. With every challenge she faced, she gained a deeper understanding of herself and the world around her. Her boutique wasn't just a business anymore. It was a platform for her to share her story, to mentor young women, and to empower those who had once been in her shoes. She had learned the hard way that beauty, wealth, and status were fleeting. What mattered now was authenticity, resilience, and love. Lerato had transformed from the arrogant, materialistic girl she had once been into someone who truly understood the value of hard work and self-respect. As her business grew, Lerato became more involved in the local community. She started organizing charity events and outreach programs for young women in Soweto, hoping to help them avoid the mistakes she had made. She used her platform to advocate for self-love, education, and financial independence. One day, while attending a community meeting, she overheard a group of young girls discussing their dreams and aspirations. Lerato joined them, offering advice and encouragement. The girls listened intently, their eyes wide with admiration. In that moment, Lerato realized the true impact of her story, how far she had come and how many lives she could still touch. As much as Lerato had grown emotionally and mentally, there was still one part of her journey she had to confront: her health. Her past, filled with reckless choices and harmful relationships, had taken a toll on her body. She had contracted HIV, a reality she had tried to ignore for so long. But now, Lerato took responsibility for her health. She started treatment, attended support groups, and educated herself on living with the virus. It was a difficult road, but it was one she knew she had to walk. She shared her experience with others, hoping that her openness could inspire others to take care of their health and avoid the same mistakes she had made. As Lerato continued her healing journey, she realized that the next step was forgiveness. It wasn't enough to forgive others. She had to forgive herself. The guilt and shame she carried had held her back for so long. But when she looked at how far she had come, she realized that forgiveness was the key to her freedom. With time, she was able to release the pain of her past. She reached out to the people she had wronged, seeking their forgiveness and offering hers in return. The process wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Each apology, each act of reconciliation brought her closer to peace. Lerato's relationship with her friends had transformed as well. Her bond with Kula, her fashion collaborator, had grown stronger, and they began working together on new projects. Kula had become more than just a friend. She was a sister, someone who had supported Lerato when she had nothing, and someone who now shared in her successes. Together, they launched a new initiative aimed at empowering young women in South Africa through fashion and entrepreneurship. They held workshops, offered mentorship, and created opportunities for women to express themselves creatively. It was a fulfilling experience for both of them, and Lerato realized that this was what true success felt like, helping others achieve their dreams. One day, while hosting an event at her boutique, Lerato found herself face-to-face with a group of young women who had attended her outreach program. They were eager to meet her, to hear her story firsthand, and to learn from her experiences. As she spoke to them, she realized how far she had come from the girl who had once been lost in superficiality. Her confidence had returned, but this time it was grounded in something deeper. It wasn't about the clothes she wore or the cars she drove. It was about the woman she had become. She was proud of the lessons she had learned and the person she had grown into. Lerato's boutique continued to thrive, and she was now considered a successful businesswoman in the fashion industry. But she never lost sight of what mattered most. She continued to work with young women, guiding them and showing them that success was not defined by appearance or wealth. She started to dream bigger. She envisioned expanding her boutique into other cities, creating a nationwide brand that would stand for empowerment, confidence, and authenticity. She wasn't just building a business, she was building a movement. Along the way, Lerato met someone who would change her life in yet another way. A man who saw her for who she truly was, not for her past mistakes or her outer appearance. He was kind, supportive, and understanding. He accepted her, HIV and all, and helped her see that love wasn't about perfection. It was about healing and growth. Together, they built a strong relationship, one rooted in mutual respect and understanding. Lerato had learned the hard way that real love could only be built on honesty and trust. She had finally found a love that nurtured her rather than using her. With her newfound success and stability, Lerato made it her mission to give back to the community that had supported her through her darkest times. She launched several charity initiatives, focusing on health education and empowering young women in underprivileged areas. Through her efforts, she began to see real change. Young girls who had once been lost in the same cycle she had been in were now graduating, starting their own businesses and becoming leaders in their communities. Lerato's heart swelled with pride as she saw the impact of her work. Lerato had gone from a girl who had once been consumed by vanity to a woman whose life was defined by purpose. Her boutique had expanded into multiple cities, and her name had become synonymous with empowerment. But she knew that her true legacy wasn't in the clothes she sold. It was in the lives she touched along the way. As she looked back on her journey, Lerato realized that the hardest moments had taught her the most valuable lessons. She had learned that real success came from within, that kindness and humility were the keys to lasting happiness, and that the most powerful thing she could do was uplift others. Lerato never stopped believing in the power of education. She had watched her classmates, the ones she had once mocked, go on to build successful careers, and she now understood the importance of knowledge. She enrolled in a business management course, determined to further her education and grow her skills. Her journey in education was challenging, but it was also rewarding. Every class she attended, every lesson she learned, brought her closer to becoming the woman she had always aspired to be. Lerato never stopped believing in the power of education. She had watched her classmates, the ones she had once mocked, go on to build successful careers, and she now understood the importance of knowledge. She enrolled in a business management course, determined to further her education and grow her skills. Her journey in education was challenging, but it was also rewarding. Every class she attended, every lesson she learned, brought her closer to becoming the woman she had always aspired to be. One evening, as she sat in her boutique after closing hours, Lerato took a moment to reflect. She had come so far since those dark days in Sandton, when her life had revolved around wealth and superficial beauty. She had faced the consequences of her actions and learned the hard way that true happiness couldn't be bought. Now, as she looked around at the life she had built, she realized that she had found something far more valuable than wealth: inner peace, self-respect, and the knowledge that she was making a difference. Lerato spent the next few years focused on her business and personal growth. She traveled the world, learning from others in the fashion and business industries, but always with the goal of coming back and giving back to her community. Her grandmother had passed away, but the lessons Gogo had taught her continued to guide her. She carried those lessons with her every day, always reminding herself to be humble, grateful, and kind. Lerato stood in front of a crowd at a charity event, looking out at the young women she had helped. As she spoke about her journey, she felt a sense of pride and fulfillment that she had never experienced before. She had finally come full circle. The Queen of Sandton was no more. In her place stood a woman who had learned the true meaning of success. A woman who had built a legacy not of wealth, but of empowerment, self-love, and compassion. Lerato knew that the road ahead would still be filled with challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She had found her purpose, and that was worth more than anything she had ever sought in the past. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the rich and captivating world of Zulu folktales. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share it with your friends and family. Your support helps keep the magic of African storytelling alive. Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts, favorite moments, or even your own folktales to share. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep the spirit of storytelling alive. See you in the next tale. Bye for now.